So you see these US warships off the coast of Venezuela, right? And your first thought is probably invasion. But what if I told you the real American strategy is something, well, a lot more subtle and complex than that? In this explainer, we're going to deconstruct this high-stakes pressurization campaign and see how it's actually designed to force change from the inside. Yeah, so those warships patrolling the coast, they're not just for show. They are absolutely there to send a message. And that message is, as one source put it, that the United States is prepared to go all the way. The whole point is to create this credible, legitimate threat of military action. Okay, so a credible threat. Does that mean a full-scale invasion is right around the corner? It's really easy to jump to that conclusion. But the truth is, the US strategy here is way more complex and nuanced than it looks on the surface. So, let's get into what it actually is. The strategy isn't about gearing up for an immediate fight. Instead, it's what experts are calling a pressurization campaign. Think of it more like a war of attrition. This isn't a sprint, trying to topple the government in one go. It's a marathon, a long march, as they say. It's all about this persistent, patient effort to just apply pressure. The idea is to create cracks, these fractures inside President Maduro's regime, and hopefully force a negotiated transition that's led by people already on the inside. And it's really important to get what this strategy isn't. It's basically the exact opposite of a conventional invasion. We're not talking about a fast, hard strike. This is a slow, steady squeeze. The goal is to encourage change from within, not to impose it from the outside. Why? Well, it's all about avoiding that chaotic day-after scenario we've seen play out so many times after military interventions.
So how do they do it? The campaign really pulls on two main levers of pressure. First, you've got that military posturing we talked about, the warships. But then there's the other lever, and you could argue it's even more powerful, economic strangulation. We're talking about seizing oil tankers, cutting off illicit revenue, and basically choking off the regime's ability to pay the very people keeping it in power.
Okay, to really get why this whole strategy might even work, we have to flip the script. Let's look at this whole thing from the perspective of the main target, President Nicolas Maduro himself. For Maduro, you have to understand, this isn't just politics anymore. It's not some grand chess match. At this point, analysts are pretty clear on this. It is purely and simply about survival. There's this saying in Latin America that just perfectly captures the stakes here. It goes, you either go on the ground, in jail, or in exile. Now think about that. When a leader believes those are their only three options, they're not just going to hand over power, right? No way. They're going to dig in and they're going to fight. So let's play this out. If exile is an option, where would he even go? Well, Russia and Turkey seem like pretty good bets, right? They've got friendly governments. But what's interesting is that Cuba is seen as unlikely, and the thinking behind that is pretty fascinating. Cuba itself might be a future target for regime change, so for Maduro, it's not exactly a safe long-term bet.
All right, so you've got this intense pressure building from the outside, and on the inside, you've got these raw survival instincts kicking in. So how does this all end? The analysis actually breaks it down into 4 potential paths to change.
And these possibilities, they really run the gamut. They go from an internally led transition, which is what's seen as most likely, all the way to a full-blown external conflict, which is, well, the least desirable for everyone involved. So here they are, these 4 scenarios, and they really do range from the preferred to the absolutely catastrophic. Path 1, a palace coup. Basically, the military takes over from the inside. Path 2, a negotiated transition, brokered by the political bigwigs. Path 3, a targeted U.S. special operation to physically remove Maduro. And Path 4, the one we've been talking about, a full-scale conventional invasion. Now, this breakdown is really telling. Take a look. The 2 most likely outcomes, the palace coup and the negotiated deal, what do they have in common? They both come from inside Venezuela. A special op? Possible, but not probable. And that conventional invasion? Yeah, that's listed as the absolute worst-case scenario. And this right here, this brings us to the absolute heart of the pressurization strategy. It's all about this intense, high-stakes psychological game being played with Maduro's inner circle. Imagine you're one of those military generals or a political insider propping up the regime. This entire campaign is designed to put one single terrifying question in your head. When? When is the right time to make my move? And that calculation is just loaded with risk. I mean, think about it. You act too early, the coup fails, you're looking at jail time or worse.
But you wait too long and the change happens without you, you're going to be on the wrong side of history with the new leadership. What you're looking for is that one perfect, tiny window of opportunity to jump ship, secure your future, and maybe even get a seat at the table in a post-Maduro Venezuela.
And that is the whole point of the pressurization campaign. It's designed to create this intense, suspicious environment where literally everyone inside the regime is constantly weighing their options, looking over their shoulder and wondering who's going to be the first to jump.
So, this all leads us to the final piece of the puzzle, the strategic logic behind this whole thing, which is all about planning for the day after. Which, of course, brings up the big question, why? Why is the US so focused on this slow, complicated path? Why not just go for a more direct, forceful intervention and get it over with? Well, a quick, violent break like an invasion, it just opens up a Pandora's box of problems. For starters, you'd have the US military fighting Venezuelan soldiers, which creates resentment that can last for generations. Plus, it would obligate the US to lead a really long, difficult, and super expensive nation-building process. And that is the one outcome they want to avoid at all costs.
So what's the ideal scenario from Washington's point of view? It's a stable transition, one that's led by Venezuelans themselves, one that peacefully brings back democratic institutions and lets the country rebuild from the inside out. They want to provide outside support, not outside control. And so that leaves us with the ultimate question, doesn't it? As all this pressure, both economic and military, keeps building and building, will those cracks inside the regime finally break open? And will the change so many people are waiting for come from within the walls of Caracas or from the forces gathering just outside?